Hello, everyone. I come to you from the kitchen, where Mark Giulietti worked his magic and expressed his love. It is also poignantly where he breathed his last in my arms, in the chair that he sat in every day we lived in this house, except when we were traveling, which was a lot. Many of you have known Mark Giulietti a lot longer than me, but no one, I don't think, knew him as thoroughly as I did. I recorded this eulogy for two reasons. The first one is so that I could get through it without blubbering all over the place and making it about me and not about Mark. The second reason is that Mark had friends all over the United States, literally from sea to shining sea, and in the case of Debbie from England and cousins in Italy, even across the ocean. This will be posted on YouTube for all who could not be here today. Mark Giulietti, Christian, son, brother, uncle, husband, friend, neighbor, veteran, employee, cook, gardener, community member, world traveler, lover of the poor, and in all of it and always, tight with a dollar. More on that at the end, so stick around. What a life! Nobody knows it all except God, to whom we entrust this man with full confidence in the resurrection from the dead. I begin with Gail. In case you don't know, Mark and Gail were on the telephone almost every day. The only exception to that was when Gail and Greg were traveling, when to use the phone would have cost money. Even Mark had limits on his brotherly affection and attention. As a matter of fact, it is no exaggeration to say that Gail is responsible for Mark getting a cell phone. Notice I did not say a smartphone. He never had one of those and was quite proud of the fact. He used to say, "I have a stupid phone." But Mark was not a complete Luddite, primarily because he had me as his personal technology assistant. But Mark got a cell phone because it enabled him to talk to Gail for free. And when she and Greg were in Florida, Gail got Mark on her family plan, and the calls continued so long as Gail and Greg were not on a ship or overseas when charges would have applied. This last lapse in Mark's communications with Gail was often solved by Mark traveling with Gail. That started in 1971 when Gail was 16 and Mark took her on her first cruise, and the rest, as they say, is history, including that first naughty Singapore sling. Cruising for Mark was a friends and family affair that began long before I came on the scene. Mark's love for his parents extended way beyond the frequent visits and phone calls that any dutiful son might be expected to do. Al and Lena were at Mark's home for every holiday and then at our home. But it was Al and Lena presiding at the midnight buffets on the cruise ships that sticks in my memory, surrounded by so many friends who were always on the trips. Mark was the one who orchestrated these trips for many years. It was forever known as the Friends and Family Winter Caribbean Cruise. Does anyone, hold on a second. Does anyone remember what this is? I think they used to call this a Rolodex. It's a symbol, yes, of Mark's technology challenged life, but more so of how he kept in touch with so many people over so many years. He was always on the phone with this one from the Air Force or that one he met on a cruise 25 years ago. Mark met monthly until very recently with friends from his Newington high school class of 1967. He was always thinking of others by sending cards or emails for various occasions or just to keep in touch. He was on Facebook. The ease of keeping in touch with so many people all at once being a temptation, even technology adverse Mark Giulietti could not resist. Nevertheless, I was always the one deputed to document to our Facebook followers our adventures into the world. He always enjoyed our where in the world teases and made sure I did not forget to post one. As most of you know, Mark spent most of his career working for the State Department of Consumer Protection, administering the state's new car lemon law. What you can't know is that Mark was actively involved in the International Association of Lemon Law Administrators, and that involvement continued for more than 15 years after he retired from the state. Why? Because Mark Giulietti was never afraid to speak his mind. It was said of Mark that he would give voice to what everyone else was thinking but were afraid to vocalize. People loved that about him. My favorite example was the nickname Mark bestowed on the one-time Commissioner of Consumer Protection, his boss. I will not mention the commissioner's name, but everyone who worked for Consumer Protection some years ago knows who Cranky Pants is. As open and forthright as he was, Mark was sort of closeted as a gay man when I first met him. He was active in the Gay and Lesbian Community Center in Hartford and frequented Nick's, a gay bar in Hartford. He also attended Mass with Dignity Hartford, a spiritual oasis for gay Catholic men and lesbian women. That's where we met in 1996. At the office, Mark was Mark, but his sexual orientation was never openly discussed or even adverted to. But he did not work with fools. I walked into the office one day, and the woman at the reception area, whom I had never met, looked up, saw me, and called back, "Mark, Steve's here." They all knew that we were dating. Mark's closet had lots of windows. Mark Giulietti did not care what other people thought of him, and that was sometimes annoying, but mostly refreshing. He would often dress like a bum. Do I see Gail rolling her eyes at this point? He liked it when people thought he was poor. Ironically, he cared very much for the poor. For many years, he only stopped a short time ago, he helped run the St. Mark's Food Pantry. He was there every Monday afternoon and then would make the rounds of the supermarkets and other places to pick up donations. I know Cheryl Russick, who runs the pantry, is going to miss him like crazy. As a member of the community, Mark was involved with our West End historic neighborhood, where we bought our home in 1997. Over the years, Mark served on many boards and was involved in many organizations, and of course, he was always involved in all of the things in which I was involved, sometimes unwittingly. His favorite was the Art League. We rarely missed an opening reception there. Mark served on the board of the Greater New Britain Arts Alliance for many years and could always be counted on to lend a hand, whether it was a fundraiser of some sort or providing hospitality for reception in the downtown and Stockman galleries. Mark also served on the Historic Preservation Commission in New Britain for some years. He had a special love for the New Britain Museum of American Art and was a loyal volunteer for almost 30 years and served on the Volunteer Council. No discussion of Mark Giulietti would be complete without mention of his Italian heritage and food. Mark was a member of the Sons and Daughters of Italy New Britain chapter and received a statewide award from them. Mark spoke Italian and Spanish, as a matter of fact. He was unhappy with his name. He wanted to be Guido or something more obviously Italian. I always called him Marco, but Al and Lena wanted their kids to be fully American, and so they never even spoke to them in Italian. As a matter of fact, when Al and Lena wished to discuss something privately, they would converse in Italian. That device came to a screeching halt one day when little Marco commented on some private matter they were discussing in Italian. He had picked up the language without their teaching it to him. As for food, Mark carried on the family traditions. Everyone's favorite was the lamb cake for Easter, made in the very pan that Lena used for decades before. Swathed in Cool Whip, sprinkled with coconut, with a cherry nose and raisin eyes, it was the star of Easter dinner. Then there was Lena's cheese bread, a taste hard to describe but absolutely unforgettable. Please don't ask for the recipe. When asked how much flour to use, Lena's classic reply was, enough! Homemade pasta happened, perhaps not as often as I would have liked, but Mark inherited Lena's gnocchi board. And over the years, this board has been the site of a lot of mixing and cutting and making of the gnocchi. Mark was most well known for his pizzelles because they traveled beyond our home and into the homes of those we visited. I've often been asked why I didn't do more of the cooking. I did occasionally, but I always had to clear it with the cook beforehand. Mostly I just stayed out of the way and let Mark operate on autopilot. To save the best for last, I mentioned Mark Giulietti's faith. It was truly his and no one else's. His faith was deeply personal, real, authentic. We shared this in common, but he did not get it from me. It was rather one of the things about him that attracted me to him. He did not even get it from his parents. Mark wanted to be part of the community of faith from a young age. Alina facilitated this, but never really encouraged it. Mark's faith was significantly strengthened during his 6 years in the Air Force and his involvement with the Cursillo movement. Ever the practical one, Mark's faith was based on simple personal prayer, the study of sacred scripture, at least weekly celebration of the Christian Eucharist, service to the poor, and camaraderie with fellow parishioners. He was remarkably tolerant and even welcoming to the Jehovah's Witnesses who came to our home. I never understood that until one day I realized he was trying to convert them. Mark was a man of faith. It was this faith that sustained him over the time of his illness, and it is this faith that makes his death not a tragedy for him, but the beginning of a new life in God. As we grieve for ourselves, let us be happy for him and grateful to God for a life well lived that continues on in a new dimension to which all of us are destined. About that tight with the dollar remark with which I began this tribute, Mark lived well, very well, but to say he was careful with money grossly understates the reality. When Mark graduated from high school in 1967, his grandfather Giulietti gave him a Northeast Utilities stock certificate worth $100. We all know what a typical 18-year-old would have done with that. But Mark, even back then, was not typical. Over the decades, financial advisors tried to convince Mark to sell that stock to cash in. But Mark wanted to keep it and watch it grow as a tribute to his grandfather, and well, Mark was always more interested in saving than in spending. The situation now is that except for that original $100, all of the value of the stock is in its increase. The taxes on selling it would be enormous. We decided many years ago that this stock would go to some nonprofit. Mark hated paying taxes, and so in tribute to Mark, his grandfather, and to avoid capital gains taxes, Mark's Northeast Utility stock, now held by Eversource, is being given to the New Britain Museum of American Art to be added to their endowment for the preservation of the collection and the maintenance of their buildings, their operations, and their programming. The value of this stock as of December 11th, 2025 is $229,800. A life well lived indeed.